Welcome to the Freight Agent Insider Podcast, hosted by Levi Van Pay.
Freight friends, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Freight Agent Insider. I'm Levi, your host. Good to have you all here. Before we dive in today, and this is going to be a very, very fun episode for all of us, we're going to learn a lot today. Before we get there, let me dive into these show notes really quick and get those knocked out for everybody. First and foremost, the Freight Agent Expo that I'm putting on in January 15th and 16th, 2027 is on. It is happening. You can check out the speaker list that we have set up at fax27.com. You can book your ticket now, reserve your room, get your flight set up. See you in Vegas. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is the first time there's ever been a freight agent specific conference. It's never been done before. I have no idea how it's going to go. Even if it goes poorly, it's going to go good because we're going to get drunk and play blackjack. So that's what's happening there. Number two, we have a new website all set up at freightegentinsider.com. If you would like to be on the show, you got to be doing something relevant to freight, be an agent, something, but we like to get new people on the show all the time. Or if you don't want to be on the show and you want to get involved in some way, you can go to the page, go on air, and you can pre-record a question. We'll answer it, ask it and answer it with our guests live on the show. All right, everybody, it's time. I would like to introduce everybody to the CEO. She's a founder, author, and comp goddess, Beth Carroll. Beth, how are you today?
I'm good, Levi. How are you doing?
Good. We're out here we were just talking about, we're out here in the Midwest trying not to lose power while we do this, but we've got tornadoes coming down all around us lately, it seems like. So
Yep.
we're hanging in there, I think.
Yep. As I was saying, last night we were playing tornado bingo, and my stepson said if we were doing shots for every touchdown, we'd all be drunk right now. So it was last night was crazy. We stopped counting at about 8. Yeah.
Speaking of touchdowns, if you're a Bears fan, there's going to be a lot of happy campers listening into this because it seems like, unfortunately for me, I can't stand them, but a lot of Bears fans. So I don't know where you fall on that.
I am completely agnostic in regards to football. I don't care.
I like you more then. That's a much better answer than being a Chicago Bears fan.
And my father-in-law is actually a huge Packers fan. So
I knew I liked your family. Good
yes,
stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
So Beth, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, what you're doing now. Let's dive into that.
Yeah, so basically, I've been designing sales commissions plans, incentive plans for almost 30 years now. The last 20 of which has been basically running my own company focused on the transportation and logistics industry. So I've worked with over 500 total companies, 300 of which are in the transportation and logistics space. And the vast majority of them are freight brokers. So I've done a ton of work with freight brokers. And as you and I talked about at the TIA show, Levi, some of them have been ones where they are agents. They're big enough that they have staff, but they are agents of another company. So they might be an agent of Global Trans or an agent of Landstar or somebody like that. But it's interesting that that's sort of a little niche. And then I've also helped some where they're more like the ones who are providing the services, like the TM, like they're the ones who are giving the hiring on the agents and providing the freight bill payment and the TMS and all that kind of stuff. So I've worked with a couple of those as well. Freight Tech. Sorry, Steve Van Otten being one of the main ones.
Yep. How did you find your way into this? It's such a unique skill set that you've built and developed. Like you mentioned, we met at the TIA and I was kind of a bit enamored, if it's okay to say that, by what you were doing, because I was like, it seems like there's a new agent brokerage popping up left and right every other day, but nobody really talks about this specifically, and it is the most important piece of the entire pie.
Yep. So quick bio on me. I did not grow up saying I want to be, the comp goddess for the freight brokerage industry. But I ended up, I got an MBA from Northwestern and that was in the late 90s. And so at the time, everybody was recruiting like Bain, BCG, Booz Allen, McKinsey. Everybody wanted to be a strategy consultant. That was the big place to go. I ended up going with Towers Perrin into their strategy and organization practice. So I thought I was going to be doing the strat and org stuff. Connected into that group was Salesforce Rewards, Salesforce Effectiveness, which was really good for me that I had done a bunch of those projects because in the dot-com bust, Towers divested, got out of all of its strat and org stuff. So a bunch of the people that I was hired with got laid off. Went through 2 rounds of that, but because I was still doing comp and Towers was sticking with comp, I stayed. So I was with Towers for 10 years in their Salesforce Rewards, Salesforce Effectiveness practice. And at the end of, I kind of wanted to leave. I was getting they were going to merge with Watson Wyatt. It was getting really corporate. And I was like, I'm ready to be done with this. They sent me out to Cedar Rapids. So they were like, we've got this client, CRST Logistics. They've been using us for, exec comp, and now they want to do something with their freight broker comp. We don't know what any of that is. Beth likes that weird stuff. We're going to just send her out there. So I went out to work on CRST while I was still with Towers, and then I gave Towers 3 months notice. They knew I wanted to start my own business. It was all very amicable. And then CRST hired me back to actually administer their comp plan. So no conflict of interest whatsoever. But that's how it really got started. And I can tell you more than once, administering the plans that I had designed, I was like, okay, what idiot designed these plans? Because I had never been on the other side of it, right? And of course, I was the
Right.
idiot. But at Towers, it was very easy. We were working with companies that were huge, and so they had, 20 people in sales ops or rev ops to be able to calculate the incentives. Brokers don't have that. It was one person in the accounting department having to do all of this. And so I figured out pretty quickly that I had to change the way I was designing the plans to make it work for freight brokers, and that's evolved over the years. I've continued to make it even more simple, right? More motivational, but more simple, so that it can be calculated by one poor person in accounting using an Excel spreadsheet. So that's how I
Yeah.
ended up. It just ended up sort of, just happenstance. And in 2009, I spoke at my first TIA conference, and, pretty quickly by 2010, I was at 20 clients, and now I'm at 300. So
You've reached comp goddess status. That is not a self-prescribed nickname. That's the truth of it. And I think the relevance here, Beth, is it's paramount that I'll give you a quick example. I know an agent or agency rather, because it is quite a large agency. So it's multiple leadership, we'll call them, within this agency, and told me the other day they just laid off, I think, 14 of their sales staff because they weren't producing. And I know you have some very interesting takes around motivational theory that can help agents and brokers alike get the most out of their personnel. Do you want to kind of dive into that a little bit and kind
I would
of
love to.
bridge
I
that
would love
gap?
to. Yeah, this is a new area of research for me, and really sort of getting the ideas coming together. So this may be a little rough because I'm still working it out, but it's always bothered me, like, over the years, I've seen companies be very successful with a redesign process that we do, and I've seen others fail miserably, right? And I'm often asked, especially with a customer that's about to hire me, well, what's the ROI? If we're going to spend all this money, because I'm not cheap, if we're going to spend all of this money having you help us redesign our compensation plans, what's the ROI? What are we going to get from this? And until now, I really didn't have a way to answer that question. And so I stumbled across some research from the 70s and 80s. Couple of authors, I'm not going to be able to remember the second one, but the first one is Vroom. It's really funny that the guy's name is Vroom, and he does motivation theory. It's VROOM. But he has actually a formula, and he calls it his expectancy theory. And so then that combined with this other goals research, and I've got to get the authors' names in my head. It's 2 of them, and I think they begin with K's, but they're not in my head right now. But there's another group that did research on how basically it's the foundation of SMART goals, like how having goals that are defined and measurable and time bound and all that stuff can help improve people's motivation. And so I've taken those two theories and I've put them together and I've lined them up with my now almost 30 years of doing this. And I think we really are at a point where I could calculate like an ROI. So let me walk you through the steps on this. So it's a little bit mathematical,
Please.
but all you have to do is remember that if you multiply anything by 0, like if you multiply 100 by 0, the result is 0, right? So you just have to remember that aspect about multiplication. So the 4 factors are, and this is a combination of these two theories, so I can call it my Prosperio theory because I'm adapting it. But first is, how clear are the goals, right? Do people know what it is you're expecting them to do? Do they know what good looks like? Okay, that's the first factor. And you could give yourself, say, a 0 to 3 score on that factor about how well you feel like your goals are. Are they clear to the people, right? Do they understand what
Right.
they are? The second, do they have goals? And it's amazing to me how many brokers don't even have goals, right? Like you back into it based on a commission rate, but they don't tell them like, okay, we really expect you to be doing $50,000 a month in GP. They'll just make whatever money you want to make. No, you got to give somebody a goal. Okay. So first off, do you have goals and are they clear? Second is, do they have the wherewithal to achieve the goal? So that includes things like, is it something that they can control? Like if you're measuring them on company EBITDA, they can't control that, right? You want to
Right.
make sure you're measuring them on something that they can control and they have the resources. So your TMS system works. They have the right training. They have the support staff that they need. The economy is actually favorable, right? I mean, that's one right now. It's like you could put all the goals in the world you want out there, but the economy that we've had in, the last couple of years is making those
Right.
goals very hard to achieve, okay? So give
Absolutely.
yourself a 0, 1, 2, or 3 score on that factor, right? Then the third piece is simple. It's really kind of binary. Do they trust that management is going to deliver on the pay? So that if they hit their goal, will they get the pay? Or are there clawbacks, gotchas, all of these limitations that make it so that they're not actually going to get what they were promised?
Right.
What creates distrust in the system, okay? And then the last one is where Prosperio plan designs really can drive results. And that is, does what they get matter to them? Okay. So do they understand their goal? Can they achieve their goal? Do they believe management is going to live up to the promise? And fourth, what is promised to them and is it something that is meaningful? Okay. So this is where that last one is where the design really matters, because under a straight line commission plan, that is the equivalent of winning a pie eating contest and the prize is a pie, right? You just get more of the same. There is no point along the way where something different happens. And at that point, you're like, is it really worth me working harder? Right? So that's why you want to tie that first piece, the goal, to a meaningful change in that last fourth piece. So, for example, really simple way to do this in freight brokerage. They get paid 10% of the margin up to $50,000 a month. Everything that they do over $50,000 a month, they get 15%. Not back to the first dollar, but just everything over 50,000, they get 15% of the margin from that point forward. We've now made it a 50% increase, right? The value that you get for every dollar above 50,000 is worth half again more to you than it was before that. We've created a clear goal, 50,000, right? Now it's up to the company to figure out element 2 and 3 in that formula, right? Do they have the training? Can they hit the goal? Does the TMS system work? Or what are the blockers that are in there? And then the third one is, do they trust management? Do they believe management? And that one's one, now that I've actually seen this formula put together, it explains a lot of my client failures, because I had one client where we put the plan in place. The manager, who barely bothered to attend any of the meetings to design the thing, where this was in the days when I was flying, right? So I flew to a meeting only to find out that the leader was in Alaska on some, whatever you do in Alaska. And I'm like, okay, this isn't going to go terribly well. He had the plan in place for 2 weeks and he said, I'm not seeing any change of behavior. We're not going to pay it. So I guarantee no matter what we would have done in that organization, and that wasn't the first time. I'd heard it from the interviews that people were very skeptical, right? And it was proven out. So his third component in that formula was a 0, or even a negative if that's possible. But, so it wouldn't have mattered how motivational the plan was. It wasn't going to have any impact because they
Right.
had zero faith in their leader to actually deliver on the promise.
Is there a part of this, Beth, that, like, for example, do you have a background in psychology? Because it seems like a big piece of this is psychological.
I don't actually. So my educational background is a little bit bizarre, but I have a bachelor's from Bucknell University, double major in English literature and religion. So, and then a minor in education. And
So you
then
fit right in here in the freight
yeah,
world.
exactly. No, and everybody gets all freaked out when I say the religion thing, especially when I'm going to tell you the next part. The next part is I went to the University of Chicago Divinity School for 3 years. I have a master's degree and I did 2 years of doctorate work in historical biblical criticism of all things. Um, and then I decided I didn't like being
Wow.
poor and I was going to be poor for a really
Mhm.
long time if I kept doing this. It was all academic, right? So it was much more from an
Mhm.
academic. I wanted to become a college professor, is what I wanted to do. Because back in the day, that's where all sort of the edgy, cool classes were taught, and it was like
Yeah.
also kind of the ultimate liberal arts thing. It's like psychology and history and sociology and languages and literature and like
Right.
everything gets wrapped up into the study of religion. So there's a piece. So there's that educational background. And then my family background, I have 3 older sisters, and then my dad was literally a rocket scientist, so he worked for NASA at Goddard Space Flight Center, so an all but dissertation mathematician, PhD in math. Um, I have another sister that
Incredible.
is a high school math teacher, with a master's in mathematics, another sister who's a PhD clinical psychologist. So, and then my third sister is just very supportive of all of us and helps us all out. But so I think that
Extremely impressive.
I came by it either genetically, like, nature nurture argument. Like, I think that a bunch of that's just genetic, but then also
Yeah.
like you can imagine what the conversations were around the dinner table, right? That I just grew up
I can
with.
only imagine.
Very, very math, psychology, right? And so what
Yeah.
I ended up doing with my life is math, psychology, plus the whole education thing because I wanted to be a professor. And so I get to now write books and I get to teach and I get to do stuff like this and I get to talk about like cool theories, cool motivational theories, and how can we put math into that?
And speaking of your desire to be a professor and writing books, you've written a great one here, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this and how you how you came upon the idea of creating this. So the title is Taming the Compensation Monster. Tagline: Using freight broker compensation to drive urgency, performance, and profits.
Yep.
Where did
Well,
this come from? How did you put this together?
it was it
And
was
what is this about?
okay. So basically it's a almost like a blueprint or a work step guide that somebody could go through that and they could understand all of the steps that you have to go through to revise or develop a compensation plan. And I did not make any of this stuff up. So there are, and people don't know this if they don't live in the compensation world, in the compensation consulting world, but there's an organization called World at Work and there's an organization called SHRM, so Society of Human Resources Management, SHRM. Um, both of those groups, World at Work is bigger in terms of like the certification classes and stuff, but they have certifications for you can be a certified compensation professional, which is very broad. You can be a certified sales compensation professional, which is narrow. You can be a global remuneration professional, which just means you know how to follow rules in like China and Mexico. I have all 3 certifications. And in fact, I helped write the original curriculum for the certified sales compensation professional exam. So in the training that I got from Towers, there's a pretty much a codified methodology that AGI, Mercer, Hewitt, Towers, like all of the comp consultants use. And that's, what's the target total compensation compared to the market? What's the pay mix? What are the elements? What are the weights? What are the mechanics? What's the scope? What's the form? All of this stuff. It's boom, boom, boom. You just go through these decisions. And so that part I didn't create. instead, what I did is because I wrote the book in 2017. So at that point, I'd been 9 years working with the freight broker industry. Is I just took all of that methodology and put it in the terms of how would you do that designing for a carrier sales role specifically in the freight broker world, right? So I broke it down and I used all of the examples, of what does this mean in this world and what does this look like? What are going to be some things like, for one, the biggest mistake anybody would make coming into this world, and I know there have been consultants who've done it, is they'd say, well, why aren't you paying these people on revenue? Well, you don't pay brokers on revenue, right? You
Right.
just don't. Even on the sales side, you don't pay on revenue. There has to be, or if you do, there has to be like a gross margin percentage
That's right.
qualification or something in there, right? To mitigate against them just doing loads at whatever and not worrying about if the company can actually make money on it. So I had to bring it into, like the freight broker world is really different than like SaaS sales, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, or like manufacturing sales or banking. For years, I was like the comp goddess in banking. I had done a bunch. 3 years, I worked with Fifth Third Bank doing their comp plans. And that's really different too. So it's like taking all of that and just really applying it into the specifics of this world. So just a quick little plug here. We are working on a second edition of that book that's going to come out soon with some updated graphics examples. It's going to have a pretty new cover on it. We're working on the cover design right now. Um, and then I'm also working on volume 2, which is going to be about sales roles more broadly in the transportation and logistics space. So think about asset-based sales, whether it's truckload or LTL. Think about warehousing sales. Think about freight forwarder sales. Okay. Think about all of the operational roles in this world that are actually also paid incentive comp. Carrier sales is the easy one, but there's also load planners, driver managers, customer service reps. I've done plans for weigh and reweigh managers inside an LTL carrier.
Wow.
I've done plans for terminal ops, right? So there's all of these operational roles because they directly affect profitability. So if you think about like how weird this world is, a load is sold and delivered at almost at the same time, right? And so the way that that is delivered directly impacts the value of the sale. Like, so those two
That's right.
things are so tightly connected that you can't just pay salespeople and say, well, we don't care about how it's operationalized. How it's operationalized directly affects the value of the sale, the customer retention, all of those pieces, right? And the profitability, the long-term profit. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about warehousing or asset or brokerage or managed transportation, that same relationship exists between sales and operations. So it's going to really get into those nuances of how you pay those roles differently because they're not all the same. You're not going to pay managed trans the same way you pay freight brokers.
That's right. That's right. Beth, let me ask you again, plug yourself on this one. Where can our brokers, agents, and anybody who wants to read the old edition? I know you're working on a new one. Where can
New ones.
they find this?
It's on Amazon, right? So you can get it on Amazon. You can also email me at beth.carroll@prosperiogroup.com, and we'd be happy to send you a free copy of it. So if you want to go that route, we can do that route too. Just be a little slower probably than Amazon. But on Amazon, it exists in the format you have. It also exists in ebook and it exists in audiobook. So there's a bunch of
Yeah,
different formats.
and it is worth a read for earlier I had mentioned that large agency that had let some people go, and I remember talking with them early on about their strategy, like what were they going to do to incentivize a couple of these hires, and it didn't necessarily seem like there was a true plan in place. For lack of a better way of putting it, let's throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks.
Yep. Yep.
um w- let's talk about agency specific and how to uh how to I suppose hiring people. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here, but the incentive that these individuals have, because we both know, Beth, agents are already working on a slice of the pie, a large slice of the pie, mind you, but they're not getting 100% of
Right.
the
You're not
profit.
getting 100%. But
So
it's not that different than if they were running their own brokerage, right? If they were running their own brokerage, they would have to pay for the TMS system. They would have to pay for an accounting department. They would have to pay these things that basically they're buying from their, I don't know what you call the parent of an agent, but they're buying from that company, are things they would have to pay. So it doesn't really change their economics that much.
that's right.
Um, but I think, like when you and I were talking a little bit before the show, I think one of the things that would be hard for an agent who's trying to grow their team, like they're hitting maximum capacity, because they're doing cradle to grave. They can't do anymore. They need to bring somebody on to help them. Is that they're going to expect everybody to think like they do. I mean, they have a very strong ownership mentality, right? They know they're running their own business, and they're going to expect anybody that they hire to have that same mentality. And when they don't, it's going to be frustrating to them. So that's where they really need to step outside and realize that now they're shifting into becoming a manager. And they have to give that person some structure. Just go back to the motivational theory that I went through, right? Just do your little math on the 4 points. Do they have a goal? Can they achieve the goal? Do they believe you're going to pay them? Is the payment meaningful? And as a manager, you have the responsibility to give your people those things. If you're not training them, if you're not giving them good TMS system, if you're not giving them guidance and telling them what good looks like, and if you're just expecting them to work the same way you do, it isn't going to happen.
Right. This is something we run into quite a bit, is we have a lot of redundancy in certain ways on the show, in that we have large agent A comes on. We talk about how did you get from where you started and hit this growth, but there is always, almost always, I should say, a ceiling. There's a cap. Like there's uncapped commissions, of course, but there's a cap on how much you can handle yourself before you've just hit a ceiling and you need to scale your business. And that's something that I think salesmen and saleswomen, they aren't necessarily great businessmen and businesswomen in the sense of how do you get to the next level? And that is the importance of what we're talking about here, Beth. So let's use just a quick example of, we've got an agency that is scaling quickly. Like they've gone from 50K to 150K, and they need to start, whether it's bringing in ops personnel or adding sales to the team. How does the comp plan evolve as they grow?
Mm-hmm. Depends on how they start, right? So are they trying to add in another person like them, or are they trying to add in like a carrier sales resource? There's two different ways you can go. You can say, I'm cradle to grave. I want to add somebody else who's cradle to grave. And for them, you're going to probably lean more heavily on a uncapped commission, right? Where eat what you kill kind of thing. We're kind of two separate business entities. It's almost like me and my former business partner when I first left Towers. It's like we're both operating our own businesses. We're just sharing some resources. Or if what they're doing is they're keeping themselves sort of at the top, but they're bringing on, okay, I need somebody maybe to handle carrier sales, or I need somebody to handle track and trace. Those people are going to need to have salaries. You're not going to get them in the door and say, well, I'm going to pay you a 10%, 100% commission, right? It's not going to happen unless they happen to be your brother, right? Um, they're not likely to do that. So you have to make sure you're paying market competitive pay, which these days for any of these support roles, salaries is going to be north of 40,000. You're just really not going to be able to bring on somebody for much less than 40,000 these days of any caliber, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're going lower than that, then there's a bit of you get what you pay for kind of thing. Maybe you look into somebody who's great, who's willing to work for 35, but probably not. So you're probably looking at like $40,000 and up from a salary perspective. And then you're going to quickly have to figure out how to motivate them with incentive compensation, because this world is variable comp driven. And you're going to want to keep it simple, right? Don't over engineer it, as I've learned over the years, right? Many people who knew me at the beginning would say, oh my God, Prosperio plans are too complicated. I have learned over the years to simplify it while you have to keep a goal, right? There has to be something where they are trying to get to. Ideally, you have three: a threshold, a target, and an excellence level, right? So there's a minimum level that they have to do before they start to get any incentive comp. That's your seat cost equivalents, right? And then you have your target, which is where they get 100% of the target pay. And then they have excellence, where they are hitting, a 1 in 10 kind of performance level. Ideally, at each of those 3 points, something material changes in their compensation. And if you can just do that, right, then you're a long way to having a maximally motivational incentive compensation plan.
As you've kind of seen brokerages evolve over the years, you've been doing this a while. Are you starting to notice let's use a W-2 brokerage as an example, where you've got somebody of a high caliber, they're constantly hitting goals, they're constantly hitting their metrics, where it's getting harder to keep those people around because they say, well, I know I'm capped in certain ways, and that if I became an agent, let's say, now I can make a lot more money. I know how much I'm making for this brokerage, but there's a real difference there. Has that changed, or from what you're seeing, are these things kind of flat? They don't really change.
You know
Pay your
what?
people well, treat them well.
It flows back and forth. I think somewhat depending on the economic situation. I suspect in 21 and 22, there were people who were it was more appealing to, hey, maybe I should go start my own brokerage right now. Because freight rates were high, people were making money, typical margin percentages were in the low 20s, low to mid 20s. Whereas now a lot of my clients are struggling to get to 10.
Right.
So, yeah, so I think it somewhat depends on the economy, whereas now with things being tight, having the security of being inside a company and having a fixed income, having at least some minimum salary expectation is going to be more appealing. Um, but I think there's a lot of it that just really depends on, and I want to challenge something you said at the outset. Even within a W-2 environment, most of the plans that I work with for sales and carrier sales, so whether it's the customer side or the carrier side, are uncapped incentive plans, right? So
Interesting.
there is no actual limitation to how much they can make. And I personally know of, because I run compensation surveys for the freight broker world. So Measure Up, another plug for that one, measureup.net. But that there are people in this world, many of them, who make well over $1 million that are living inside as a W-2 employee, right? They're not
Incredible.
agents. Yeah, but they are, because of the way their comp structure works. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's reality that there are. It's like 0.01% of the market, but they are there,
Right.
right? They are there. And I think any well-designed incentive plan for sales or carrier sales would not be capped. Why would you tell them to stop? Right? That doesn't make
Right.
any sense. What they are going to feel is probably a change of expectations. Okay. So what they're going to feel is like, okay, well, it used to be $50,000 a month was good. Now it's 60 or 75 or 80, right? And they may think when they go off on their own as an agent, well, I would be okay with just, if I'm making 70% of my 50 or whatever, I'm going to be happy with that, until they start to realize there's other costs to run the business. And
That's
then they're
right.
going to do it to themselves, right? They're going to be like, okay, well, I can't make as much money personally keep as I did before unless I'm doing 60 or 70 or 80. And so then they're going to have to raise their own goals, and at some point, they're going to go, oh crap, that's exactly why the business used to do this to me, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
because the business has more expenses that they have to cover. It's not that they're mean. It's that they're investing in a better TMS system. They've, done offshore, track and trace. They've adding whatever AI tool these days they're going to add. The insurance is going to go through the roof now after the Montgomery decision,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So there's a variety of things that just cause the business economics to need to get more production out of people for the same pay. It feels unfair if you're in that role, but it's just the reality of running a business. Me as a business owner, right? I have to increase the amount of money that I make every year, top line, in order for me to take home the same amount of money, because
Right.
my expenses have changed, right? So my percentage, my take, keeps dropping from the top line of what the business is making. It's just unfortunate reality of running a business.
Yeah, and you make a really good point too about the W-2 uncapped commission side of this, where I imagine, and you know this world so much better than me because I don't really deal a whole lot with the W-2 side, which, and I will say, agency is not for everybody. 1099 is not for everybody. I'm W-2. There is a world where W-2 is just, there's good fits, right?
Mhm.
And I think the uncapped portion of that is such an amazing incentive for keeping people driven and keeping them in-house, as opposed to saying, well, I'm not making any more money, I'm doing more work, so now I'm going to leave. And Beth, we could talk about that a lot longer. We are at the end of the show time, but I want to allow you to give any advice or motivation. You are the comp goddess, and you've got a lot of good advice for us. If there's anything you would like to leave us with as we wrap this up.
Clear goals, tell people what good looks like, and make sure that something meaningful happens in their compensation when they hit the goal. Do
Simple
those
as
2
that.
things. Yeah, exactly. Do those 2 things, and you'd be a long way to having a better motivational incentive plan.
I love it. And again, where can we buy your book and your upcoming
Amazon.
book?
Amazon, both of them
Amazon.
on Amazon, or email Beth.Carroll, 2 R's, 2 L's, at prosperiogroup.com, and we will be happy to send you a copy for free.
Yeah, and if you actually need Beth's service, and I know there's a lot of brokerages out there that could use your service, reach out to her. She knows what she's talking about. Beth, thank you so much for dropping some B-52 knowledge bombs on us today. It was a lot of fun. It was very, very I feel smarter and a little bit brain buzzed after that. That was a lot.
That's what I always tell my clients. If I make your head hurt at the end of the first meeting, I've done my job. All
you,
right. Thanks,
you did
Levi.
you did wonderful. Thank you.
All
Guys,
right.
we'll be back next Monday, 9 a.m. Central for another episode. We will see you then. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for watching the Freight Agent Insider Podcast. Like us and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, and LinkedIn